welcome to the Bryan Board of Public Affairs meeting for October 6, 2015. The first thing on our agenda is to approve the minutes of the September 15th, 2015 meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review those?
I think they're okay for as I'm concerned.
Second.
Al?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Bonnie?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Number 2 then would be a hearing of public concerns. Seeing none, we'll move on. Number 3, a resolution designating the week of October 4th through 10th, 2015 as Public Power Week and an invitation to community members to attend an open house at the electric department facilities.
This would be resolution number 32, 2015. A resolution designing the week of October 4th through the 10th as annual Public Power Week and recognizing Bryan Municipal Utilities for its contributions to our community. If you guys don't mind, I'd like to read the resolution in entirety if we could. So whereas the citizens of Bryan place high value on local control over community services and therefore have chosen to operate a community-owned, locally controlled, not-for-profit electric utility, and whereas Bryan Municipal Utilities provides our homes, businesses, farms, social service, and local government agencies with reliable, cost-effective electricity, and whereas Bryan Municipal Utilities is a valuable community asset that contributes substantially to the well-being of local citizens through energy efficiency, customer service, economic development, and safety awareness, and whereas Bryan Municipal Utilities has taken on additional stewardship for our community's information infrastructure through a broadband network providing internet, cable TV, and data transfer, expanding community and economic development opportunities. Therefore, be it resolved that Bryan Municipal Utilities will continue to work to bring low-cost, safe, reliable electricity to community homes and businesses just as it has since 1896, the year when the electric utility was created to serve all the citizens of Bryan. And under Section 1, that the week of October 4th through the 10th be designated the 29th Annual Public Power Week in order to honor Bryan Municipal Utilities for its contributions to the community and to join more than 2,000 other community-owned electric systems in the United States and in celebration of this power. And that this resolution shall be in effect, full force and effect at its earliest provided by law. So, we're pretty excited about it. Nice little article in the paper, nice press release that Lou sent out. The rodeo guys that were part of the rodeo team, which I'll wait to the end and let Al introduce all those guys. We'll be doing some demonstrations this Thursday, also hot dogs and whatnot. So I'm excited. It's a good way to celebrate who we are and what we do.
Do we need a motion to pass that?
So moved.
Second.
Al?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Bonnie?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes. Okay, number 4 on the agenda then is a presentation by Bennett and Williams on the groundwater study.
Okay, we are going to have, and I told both women that I would probably butcher their names, so I'm going to have Linda Aller and Carrie, help me out here, Carrie. Zoriski step up to the podium. They are principal hydrogeologist and principal engineer for Bennett and Williams. And we, the team that was part of this from the water department was made up of Derek and Lou and Norm and Nathan Gardner, myself. A lot of the work was on their end. And what we wanted to really accomplish was look at our 1 to 5 year delineation zone, as well as, there was a concern on how the agricultural wells that had been going in the last couple of years, how they really affected our water resource here that we were pulling from. So I will turn it over to these women.
I get to start. I'm Linda Aller, and I'd like to thank you very much for the opportunity to present to the board, and also for the contract that you awarded for us to do this. This is me first, and this is Carrie. You'll notice that Carrie has both a PE and a PhD, and she doesn't like to be called doctor, but she certainly deserves all the credit that comes along with it. So. All right, so this is what I'd like to talk about pretty quickly today. I'd like to review just in general what is source water protection for anybody who hasn't heard the term or doesn't fully remember the last time, because there's a lot of little details that go along with it, one of the things that we did was create a model. So Carrie is going to present a description of modeling, what that means and what we did and why we did it. And as a part of that, we re-delineated what's called a 1 in 5 year time of travel. And that has to do with how you protect your water, the area within you'd like to protect your well field. Then I will talk again about effects of irrigation wells on your production wells, and then talk a little bit about path forward as far as source water protection. So, basic introduction to source water protection, 3 main components as defined by Ohio EPA. First is you have to delineate what's called this 1 in 5 year time of travel, and all that means is you'd like to know how long it's going to take for water at a certain place on the surface of the earth to get to your wells. So you pump your wells and you figure out how far, if you place a particle of water on the surface of the ground, how long it's going to take, where's 5 years before you get to your wells. And they have shapes associated with them. The second part is within that 1 in 5 year time of travel, you need to do an inventory of any potential pollution sources. And then the third is, okay, now I know where my water comes from, what's potentially here that could cause a problem, what kind of strategies can I have so that I don't let those potential sources become into real problems for me. Protective strategies, according to Ohio EPA, have 4 different parts. First, you have public involvement and education. You have a contingency plan, which includes not only where you're going to get your water from in case there's a problem, but also what you're going to do in certain emergencies if there are some. There's a groundwater monitoring component, and that is I'd like to monitor my water to make sure there's nothing coming at me. How do I do that? But really I want to just focus a little bit on source control strategies because that's kind of the most important part. So what does a source water protection get you? Does it get you anything? So yes, it does get you a couple things. In Ohio law, what it gets is there are restricted and prohibited activities within this 1 year zone and this 5 year zone. And in order to know what's restricted and prohibited, you have to know how sensitive your aquifer is to being contaminated. The Ohio EPA has designated the city of Bryan's aquifer as a moderate susceptibility. So if you have a moderate susceptibility, these things here are not permitted in your 1 year time of travel. No animal feeding operations within your 1 year time of travel. No land application of wastewater. No siting of wastewater storage facilities. Sewage biosolids, you can't stick them on the land within your 1 in 5 year time of travel. You can't stage them or stockpile them or store them in the field. And no landfills. Just think that lists all the kinds of landfills. No landfills within a 1 year time of travel if you have a moderate susceptibility like the city of Bryan. Within a 5 year time of travel, you still can't site wastewater storage facilities unless you take some engineering controls and management strategies in order to be able to prove that whatever you're doing with that wastewater system isn't going to affect the aquifer and the city's water. But still no landfills within a 5 year time of travel. Now, if you had a different susceptibility, these things would be different. But these are the things that by delineating your 1 in 5 year time of travel, EPA has restrictions on for other things that can go on there. All right, so now you'd like to see what a 1 in 5 year time of travel is, how we got there, and what we did. And this is Carrie.
Good evening. So you had a groundwater model that actually my company put together before I was working for them in 2002 that delineated a 1 in 5 year time of travel. And the reason for doing it again is that a lot has changed in the years since 2002. As everybody knows, computer software moves at the speed of light. So the software that was used in 2002 is no longer compatible with the computers. So we've used an updated modeling software. And there was some new guidance from Ohio EPA in 2014 that has changed how we delineate the 1 in 5 year time of travel. I'm going to talk a little bit about that when we get there. There are some new systems in your area that are withdrawing groundwater that weren't modeled in 2002 that we felt it was important to incorporate. And there are updated groundwater withdrawals. Every public water system changes the amount of water they withdraw annually depending on growth or development in the area. And then, of course, you have your irrigation wells, which are new. Obviously, they weren't even thought of in 2002 when this model was done. So that was the other reason for updating it. But what hasn't changed is the geology. So we use the same geological basis to define this model as we move forward, because the rocks underneath our feet really haven't changed in 13 years. So I'm going to try and tell you a little bit about how we do a model without giving you this overwhelmingly technical talk. So I'm going to try and tread that line between giving you enough information and being overwhelming. In order to do the model, you have to grid a model domain, and you choose a model domain that's big enough so that your wells sort of sit somewhere towards the middle of the domain, so that you can model the water coming towards the wells and the water leaving the wells. The grid that we used is shown on the TV screen. You can see it's 54,000 feet wide and it's 73,000 feet long, so it's a fairly large area that we're modeling. And you grid this domain. It's 167 rows and 145 columns, and you make the grid smaller right around the production wells, because that's where you need the most accuracy in your calculations. And then we have to look at, okay, we've got a spatial grid. Now how do we divide up the model vertically? You have a 3-layer model, because in order to represent the geology, what's going on beneath our feet, it was decided that you needed 3 distinct layers. The top layer, which is the top approximately 100 feet, is a layer of glacial till of reasonably low permeability. Water takes quite a long time to move through that top area, which I'm sure you guys know as you dig in your yards. Beneath that is your sand and gravel aquifer. It's about 40 feet deep, and this is the primary source of your water. And then beneath that is a layer of glacial till, and then underneath that is what geologists call bedrock. So when we put a model together, we have to model where the water's coming from and where it's going. So in order to model where the water's coming from, we have to look at water sources. So one of the sources is rivers. So you have these 3 river systems in the area, and water leaves the river through the bottom of the river and can enter the aquifer. So we have to model that source of water from the river into your aquifer. And then we model what are called boundary conditions, because the model domain, even though it's a fixed block, it's actually in contact with the rest of the world around it. So there's something called underflow. So that's the water that comes in at the top where it's orange and leaves at the bottom at the red. And that's the water that kind of flows through the model and is what allows the model domain to interact with the rest of the world around it. So those are those boundary conditions. And then the other source of water is precipitation, rainfall, snowfall, and we're going to look at that in just a minute. So one of the major parameters that we look at when we do modeling is how fast water moves through the material. This is representing your aquifer, that 40 feet of sand and gravel. Now, water doesn't move through all sand and gravel at the same rate. So some sand and gravel is really clean. It's all large chunks of sand and gravel, and water moves fast through that. But if you add some clay to it, the water will slow down and won't move as fast. So some areas of your aquifer, up to the Montpellier region, are moving slower. There's more clay, less permeable, than the area down by Bryan, which is more permeable. The water moves a little bit faster down here. Precipitation. We model this as a recharge, which is just a technical term that says how much water makes it from the surface into your aquifer. And there are zones for recharge, and that depends on the properties of the geology that we're dealing with. So the moraines, the ground moraine and the end moraine, that are in green and yellow, those are areas where there's sand with some clay, but there's still some sand. And so you get 3 or 4 inches per year of recharge into the aquifer. The red, which is the little custrin, was actually deposited under a lake scenario, and it tends to be more clayey. So there tends to be less recharge in that area of your domain. So after we put in all of these input parameters, what happens is you hit run on the model, and the model gives you these results. It outputs to you expected water levels at different areas within your model domain. But you don't know how good that information is unless you test the model. So we do what we call a calibration. And so in order to do that, I take the predicted water levels and I compare it to actual measured water levels. So some of your staff members went out to the field and they actually measured the water levels in various wells for me on different days under different pumping scenarios, so that I could make sure that the model that I was producing mimicked as closely as possible reality. And that's called calibration. So the targets that we used your production wells. You have a well in the solar well field that they measured the water level in. And then ODNR has 2 wells close to the city of Bryan, 1A and 3, where they actually monitor continuously the water levels. So we were able to access that data and use that as well. So that's all well and good. We actually want to know what this tells us. So once we have a calibrated model, then I use a program called ModPath. And what ModPath does is it allows me to determine the 1 and the 5-year time of travel. So ModPath does all these calculations, and essentially what it ends up showing us is a map that looks like this. So if I was to put a particle on the red line, that particle would take a year to reach your production wells. And if I place a particle on the blue line, then that particle would take 5 years to reach your production wells. And that's what's referred to as the 1 and 5-year time of travel. And that's the regulatorily enforced zone that Ohio EPA is interested in. You had a zone, a 1 and a 5-year time of travel zone that was designated in 2002. It's the 1 year from 2002 is in black, and the 5-year is in green. And really what I want you to notice is that the current delineation that we've just performed is much bigger than the 2002 delineation. And the major reason for that is that change in Ohio EPA guidance that I mentioned earlier. When the 2002 delineation was done, the Ohio EPA's recommended method was that you take your average annual pumping, and that's what you pumped your wells at. So it was about 1.85 million gallons is what they used. Fast forward to 2014, and Ohio EPA is saying, well, that's all well and good, but actually, as the city of Bryan, you can pump at 5.04 million gallons a day because that's what your treatment plant is rated at. So this time, we use the treatment plant capacity per Ohio EPA recommendations, and that's what makes such a big difference in the area. We're pumping at 3 times the amount. And the other nice thing that ModFlow does is that I know it's very hard for people to imagine how groundwater moves underneath the ground. So we all know how water moves through a river because we can see it. So this is our way of trying to show you what groundwater, how it moves under the ground. So what we've done is we've put particles on the 5-year time of travel. We pumped wells 1, 3, and 7, and we're showing each of those blue lines as a path that a particle is taking to get to a well. So what you can see is that although the overall water flow in the vicinity of Bryan is from the northwest to the southeast, the water down at the southeast of that area is still being pulled up by the wells, and it looks like it's kind of curving around and going into the wells. And that's because the well is going to reach out and grab as much water as it needs as you tell it to pump. So this is just a way of visualizing how the groundwater is moving in that 40-foot aquifer beneath the ground. And I'm now going to hand back to Linda, and she's going to talk a little bit about irrigation wells.
One of the things that you guys were particularly interested in is all these new irrigation wells that are going in. Do they have an effect on our ability to continue to pump water in our wells and our well field? And so these are the wells. I understand there's another one that's not on here, but these are the wells that we had at the time we did the model. And this is where the new irrigation wells are. So I don't have a pointer. Here's Bryan, and they're all up here a little bit. Now, I want to show you, well, I want to tell you a little bit about them. First of all, Derek very graciously went out and talked to people and knocked on doors and was, I'm sure, very polite, because he always is, and got all the information that he could about irrigation wells. Who owned them, who pumped them, how much they pumped, how they operated. And this is what we found out. There was a total of 6 irrigation wells owned by 4 different people. We had pumping data, but only for 4 of those 6 wells. So we kind of had to make estimations when we go to pump these other ones as far as how much water are they going to pump out of them. All these wells are new. They've all been installed since 2012. Only one well is located within your source water protection area, and it's right about on that 5-year time of travel line. So everything else is outside your 5-year time of travel. And they use the wells typically in the summer months, just like you would expect, somewhere between July and September. They're operating typically between 20 and 25 days in the summertime, and they're pumping somewhere between 123,000 and 1 million gallons a day apiece, depending. That's what we had based to work with. So let me go back up if I can make it do this just for a second. This one right here is right on your 5-year time of travel line. And like I said, all the other ones are outside, and this is completely outside your 5-year time of travel over here. It comes around like this, okay? Just so you kind of have a spatial idea of where you are. Okay, so this is how you determine whether you're going to have an effect on drawdown in your wells. Each well, when it pumps, has something called a cone of depression. So when you turn on the pump, the water level in the well goes down. And when the water level in the well goes down, that makes kind of like a cone, in theory, a perfect circle around it. And the water has to travel faster to get to the well because now you started to pump it. That's the physics of what's going on. So however deep you draw down your wells determines how much power it takes to lift your water back out again. Now, you all were the city of flowing wells, all right, but just how deep now are the water levels in your wells when you pump them? And so that's what this column here is. So we took the deepest water levels that were measured in each of your wells, the very deepest ones, and this isn't what they are always, but the worst case scenario, and they're somewhere between 30 and 40 feet beneath the surface of the ground, pumping at their hardest. Then, if you want to know what days those were and what data we have, we put the date in here so anybody can look them up, because it's always important to have reproducible data. And then our model calculated how much additional drawdown, how much further would you draw down that water in the wells when you turned on the irrigation wells. So we pumped the irrigation wells 100 days continuously. Remember, they're only operating 20 or 25, and we pumped all of them at 1 million gallons a day. Even though some of them only pumped at 123,000, and at least one of them pumped at 1 million. So we have a worst case scenario. But let's say it was a super dry summer and they pumped all 100 days and they all pumped at 1 million. If they did that, your wells would experience between 5 and 6.5 feet more drawdown in them. So that's the effect. The effect of the irrigation wells that we know about when we pump them 100 days at 1 million gallons a day apiece. You will have an extra 5 feet of drawdown to 6.5 feet of drawdown in your pumping wells. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, typically, the rule of thumb is you can never have a water level that goes beneath your screen level. It does horrible things to your screen, your well, it will ruin it. You don't ever take your water level down below the top of your screen. And in a good system, you always have the extra 5 feet. Okay? So the tops of your screens here, these are your depths, 102 to 117 feet below the surface. So this is how deep the top of your screen is. So if you take a 41-foot drawdown and you add 5 feet to it, you're now 45 feet below the ground. But you can go to 102 before you get to the top of the screen. So this column over here shows what's called available drawdown. So how much water is still in your casing that you could draw down further? Even if you added that 5 or 6 feet, you still have between 55 and almost 70 feet of available drawdown. So from a practical standpoint, this has no impact on your ability to continue to pump your wells and do what you're doing. It does increase your lift costs for electricity by however much it costs to lift 5 or 6 feet, but since you operate your own utility, that's less of a concern than it would be if you were paying outright for it. So here's the picture of what it looks like when you turn on these wells, which is kind of neat. You saw the flow lines, the idea that the water is just going to flow along here and come to your wells, okay? So this is water flowing from the northwest to the southeast, and this is, if you were a particle of water, you would follow that line all the way into the well, all right? So here's the irrigation well over here, and even when it's pumping, it doesn't have any effect because there's none of these flow lines going to it. So this one over here doesn't affect you at all. These all appear to have like no lines. So what's going on here? Well, this is called a pumping shadow. And what happens is this well here is taking it's getting all of its water from that area. So in these white spaces, there's no water coming to your wells when this one's pumping at 1 million gallons a day. When this one's pumping at 0.77 million gallons a day, there's no water going to your wells in that white space. Kind of got the idea? Same thing here. When these are pumping, there's no water going to you here. You can see these white spaces get bigger and fatter when you pump the well harder. So the more water they pump from the wells, the more water gets diverted from your well field. And this one is fatter, and then this one and that one. And this one up here, it looks like even fatter. And the reason it looks fatter is when she showed you the hydraulic conductivities, which talks about how quickly water moves through that sand and gravel, if it's bigger gravel or little gravel, dirty gravel, clean gravel. Up here, water doesn't move as fast through your aquifer. So it's going to have a bigger shadow, pumping shadow. But again, if you want to see what water looks like flowing underneath the ground, that's what a model does for you. Okay? So, armed with this new 1 in 5 year time of travel, which is bigger and therefore more conservative and more protective, I think sometimes I take a couple minutes to remind you that the city of Bryan has a wonderful water quality and a wonderful system that really is an asset. Some cities would kill to have 50 feet of available drawdown in their wells. All right, that doesn't mean you should necessarily use it, but certainly this is an asset and a resource that you should not take lightly, and I'm sure you don't because you're all board members, but some people sometimes just forget how important water is to a community, clean and safe water. There have been several municipalities that have lost their well fields to things like trichloroethylene or even chloride, salt, and had to replace their well fields. So it's important to keep the resource, keep your wells, and protect it. So how do you do that? You do that with source water protection. So now that you have this new delineation, what you need to do is send it to Ohio EPA, and they will approve it, okay, if they're so inclined, which they should be. And that will give you the legal things that go along with that 1 in 5 year time of travel. So that's just mail it off to them, say, hi, I re-delineated, please take a look at this and approve it. Then, because you have a bigger area and because things have changed in the last few years, we do a lot of wellhead protection for other municipalities as well. We had one system that had 88 potential pollution sources in, I don't know, about 2001, And because so many businesses went out of business, they only had 66 in 2014. So things change, businesses change, people come and go. In addition to that, you have a bigger area here. So you need to update your potential sources. That's something the EPA will ask you to do when you send them a new delineation, but it's something that you want to do, not just because they ask you, but because it's important to know what potential pollution sources you might have to deal with. Then, once you know what you're dealing with, you need to reconvene your Source Water Protection Committee, which you had at least established in 2004, and I understand haven't necessarily done a lot with since, but this is something that you need to do. You have a management plan on the books, but there are a lot of different things that have happened, and maybe this isn't exactly the right plan for you now. So you should put together your committee and take a look at these things and make sure these are the things that you want to do and it's how you want to do them. So there are some legal opinions now which would let you, a municipality, protect your water all the way outside your boundaries, which weren't available to you back then. And maybe you'd like to do something like that. Maybe you'd like to put a collaborative effort together with other people, but even if they don't cooperate, you have the ability to do some things now that you didn't. Compliments of an Attorney General's opinion. You need to determine if what you thought you wanted to do in 2004 you'd like to do now. Is that how you'd like to approach wellhead protection? There's a lot of people that have done a lot of plans. You can steal a lot of ideas, see what they like, see what you don't like. You don't have to reinvent the wheel here. And then determine what it is you want to do, and then put some milestones out there and figure out how you're going to do it. Because if you have a management plan that's just sitting on a shelf, it doesn't do you any good. It has to be something that comes from within you and your staff that you will support and you can move forward with. That's the only way your water will be protected in the future. Then, because irrigation wells are maybe more coming, you're still a farming community and a farming community around you, somebody ought to just keep track of these wells. Not a big item, but you might want to know if any are going in and what their pumping rates are. So if there happen to be 27 of them that are suddenly put in your 1 year time of travel, you would know that. Things that would be important. The other thing too is the most important thing that you'll do is take a look at your water quality. That's what source water protection is. So you'd like to know, is there something coming at me? Is there something that's getting a little bit worse with time? Am I going to have to do something in the future? Am I going to have to put some kind of treatment in? What am I going to have to do? Do I have a problem? Can I see it? And in order to do that, you need a database. And you need a database in a perfect world that just goes right along and interfaces with your GIS system. You guys have a wonderful GIS system that many municipal water systems would be very envious of. And so you already have that. So what you need is the database so that you can meld the two of them together and take a look at anything and analyze things that you haven't dreamed that you want to look at yet. So, okay, so I think this is Carrie and this is I. Those are our cell phones. If after we leave, you guys end up with questions, we keep our
Can I
cell
ask you a
phones with
question
us.
now?
Yep, you're going to ask just anytime.
This goes back, have they informed you what we did with EPA, it's in Chicago, way back when Skip was on the board with us, and
The source water
yes.
protection,
in our sole source aquifer?
sole source aquifer. Yes, I'm familiar.
Where does that stand? How do we get that moving?
Well, that has nothing to do with source water protection as far as Ohio EPA is concerned. I don't know all the particulars of your sole source aquifer petition. I have heard, and it's my understanding, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, that the problems related not necessarily to data that Ohio had, but data that was available for other states. And so until other states would like to fix those data gaps, apparently US EPA will not move, and that is my understanding, but your staff might be able to tell you more.
Well, I know Norm was going to Chicago.
She said it about right,
What?
it's up to the state. I mean, they gave us information we couldn't provide, so
Okay.
that's where it's at.
It's a dead issue.
Well, not
I
necessarily.
wouldn't say
Not
it's a dead
necessarily.
issue, but
Not necessarily. I mean, what we have on the table today is directed for ourselves here, and what the state of Ohio recognizes and wants us to do, and what we should be doing. That is a larger scale. So what we have in front of us is the micro environment that we're dealing with. That is more of a macro environment, larger scale. But we need to address this first.
Okay.
In my opinion, we should be addressing this first.
Absolutely.
Take care of business at home before we go to that larger chunk of the pie. Okay? And again, I do want to point out, because the staff pointed this out as well, difference between quantity, which is what this report is about, quantity of water,
And we were talking
segueing
about
into quality of water. And the segue is the recommendations of where this team is going next, is into the quality side, okay?
Because
So-
we recognized that a long time. In fact, Skip's here, that was the board member. These don't know what we went through.
Yeah, we have a different group of managers, and we're willing to bring on more individuals into this water committee. I have no problem with it. I think it's an
We
advantage to
tried
the
to
utility.
reform the group.
Mhm.
Watson was here, and a lot of people, it kind of died.
Yeah, that's the separate group, though. You were talking about Mission Dola Water Group, right? Which is outside of this. So what we have here, though, is what's in front of us is we now know that the agricultural wells do affect us a little bit,
But not that
Okay.
much.
but not as much as we anticipated. However, though, it
Time will
does.
tell.
Yeah, but it gives us a tool to start working with the agricultural community in a partnership. Now, I'm gonna say this tongue in cheek, okay? The partnership is what we want, but as staff alluded to, if that partnership doesn't materialize, there are avenues today through the Attorney General and other ways where we can start to impose ourselves in some areas. But I don't wanna go there. I mean, we shouldn't have to go there. You know, it should be
Well,
the
we've
other
got to
side.
follow this through because I'm hot on water,
Okay, so
way back when.
Norman, staff, and the team the plan is they're gonna file with assistance probably from Bennett and Williams, this report to the Ohio EPA. The group is gonna convene, and again, takers of the potential pollution source inventory plan. I did receive a recent quote from Bennett and Williams, and we'll probably go through it and chew it up and see what we need to do with it, because that's the next step.
I got onto this when I heard Julie talk here.
Mhm.
That's when I become really involved.
The final part of that, the database and analyzing that information, we collect a lot of data now, but how to get that data where you can mine it and use it for some useful benefit. Again, working through the process, but there's a plan in place on how to get that data in such a manner that our GIS can handle it. Okay, realize when we talk GIS, that is the engineering system we have in place that pretty much is, it's more robust than what most people have the ability to run. I mean, this thing is a monster, but it takes care of us.
Well, the reason I asked that question, Skip here, and I figured he'd like to have me answer the question, and he's in the back there, because he was involved too.
Something that caught my eye, what you were talking about was, we obviously have a lot of potential pollution.
I'll let Norm answer that.
sure. Potential, yeah.
Okay, I have a question that I've always wanted to know. Where does the landfill fit into that as far as?
It's outside our 5-year time of travel.
I
We're
know,
looking
it's
at our
right in
5-year
line.
time of travel.
Yeah. But you know what I'm saying? It's right in line with the flow of the aquifer.
Yes, it is.
But even if it's outside of the 5-year line, I mean, it's still there, and I mean, that's what, a year ago when we went to the open house and I saw what was going on, and they have test wells to kind of test, but they do it themselves. And not accusing anybody of anything, but, you know, I guess I'd feel a little better about the whole thing if there was a little more,
Would you like that?
and then,
addressed?
well, that, and with the history of it,
Right.
I guess that's what scared me
And
the
actually,
most.
some of these ag wells can almost act as an interceptor well.
Well, and
If you saw
like
the
I say,
shadow.
when the wells are running and the drawdown and it draws the water towards our wells, I can't help but think that if it's there, it's gonna come this way.
It is true that the landfill is within the regional flow that comes to you, and that when you pump, you actually move the water faster. There are some things, I mean, obviously, you know, they do have a groundwater monitoring system that they're required to monitor, okay, for EPA. You do have the ability, one of the source control strategies is groundwater monitoring. So you have the ability to put in monitoring wells in strategically placed areas. If the landfill is one of the things that you would like to take a look at, then you put in your own monitoring well, okay, at a certain place that's designed to let, if they have contamination, let it come to you and test it, and then you can run your own tests on that over time.
Well, I have to wonder because they're quick to show you that they do everything that's required of them to prevent infiltration into the groundwater.
And if I were them, I would do exactly the same.
Exactly, but the fact of the matter is part of the landfill is pretty old. And I don't think the regulations were there when that was established. And even though, like you said, the quality of the soil in that area is such that it doesn't, I don't know, what do you want to say, soak in as fast. It's
It doesn't
more
transmit as
clay
quickly.
soil, I guess
Yes.
you'd say. But the possibility's still there.
So that's part of that, when I mentioned you want to build relationships, you know, there's an expense to putting down wells for test wells. That's on our back, if we chose to do that, okay? There's also that relationship if there are wells within the area that we can partner up with those owners and just pull samples on, which then goes to the database, which then we can monitor, really have a pulse of what's going on with that. Okay, not only, again, quantity, but quality of water. So realistically, you should have a heads up. If we're doing our jobs the right way, we should be able to see what's coming at us. Ladies, do you agree? If we're monitoring the right way,
Yes, but you just need to know that not all production wells can be used as monitoring wells, or should be, all right? And let me explain the reason why. When you have a production well and you pump, whether it's a well for your house even, or whether it's a well for industry that pumps a little bit harder, you actually, some of the contaminants, if they're there, get stuck because you pull the water faster. Every time you pull and you suck on that straw, comes the water as opposed to just meandering it by like it normally does. So the theory is if you have a monitoring well, and I've seen it over and over, your concentrations are typically much higher in a monitoring well than they will be in a production well. And that has to do with a lot of things, but I'll give you a perfect example. We have a client that operates a well field along the Ohio River, and I don't know whether any of you have heard about C8. It's the Teflon contaminant. It makes the news a lot right now. Well, they have the highest levels of any public water system anywhere in the world. Compliments of a DuPont plant that was across the river in West Virginia. And if you look at the levels in their wells, they're still horribly high, all right? Maybe in the order of, somewhere between 2 and 10 now. But the monitoring wells were 60s and 70s. And the monitoring wells are literally, the pumping well is here and the monitoring well is where you are. And it has to do with how you get water to move to you in a well. So yes, you can use existing wells if you know a lot about them, but just remember that probably they won't catch the lower concentrations. They'll catch it if there's something that's bigger and badder there, okay? Just, that's a hydrogeologic technicality.
that's okay, thank you.
Okay? So I would never prevent you from testing anything because data always helps you, all right? But if you want a monitoring well, you might get different answers. Okay?
And if I could add, when we looked at the landfill, and we did look at it as a portion of our model, it takes about 10 years for the closest corner of the landfill, for water at that closest corner to reach your wells. So if you were to draw a 10-year time of travel, it would just clip the edge of the landfill. So that tells you the length of time for like a warning that you have from the landfill. So it's not in the 5-year time of travel, but it is in the 10-year, and unfortunately, 10-year doesn't have any regulatory status as far as Ohio EPA is concerned.
Some other states it does, but
Yes.
Ohio it does not, which is interesting.
Once you would submit this new delineation to the Ohio EPA, what happens when one of these prohibited activities wants to come into that area where the delineation is?
Ohio EPA won't permit it.
What happens is that you will submit the shapes on a disk as an electronic file to Ohio EPA, and then Ohio EPA has it on their records, and then when one of the questions on their permits will be, are you within a time of travel? And if they answer yes, that permit gets thrown out
Okay, thank you.
immediately.
Well, another thing that we were trying to do when we had a demonstration with Watson is there's a lot of abandoned wells out in this county. We're trying to get them sealed up because we don't know what they can dump in those wells. And could be another problem someday. And remember, we had a demonstration, Lou, and Watson did it for free, and it was on state ground out here in one of the parks that the state had never sealed well.
Yeah, there are lots of, even house wells, for example, that are never sealed, let alone some of the old oil and gas wells that are much deeper, and they all penetrate through your aquifer. So sometimes finding them is a problem, sometimes abandoning them properly is a problem, but
Well, there's a cost involved, they don't want to spend
always,
money.
always.
We just sealed another one, Al, just in the past,
did?
about 2 weeks ago.
But that's where we got to educate the people.
We discovered one hidden in the weeds and got it sealed.
I think you hit it on top of the head. The education part, getting the community involved. You know, we do take for granted what we have here. A lot of times we do. We don't even think about it. It's one of those commodities has been rather cheap over the years, so it's,
Exactly.
you use it, you waste it, you don't worry about it. If it cost a lot more money, we'd be more cognizant, and I think we need to be there.
Well, or if you had something happen like Toledo had happened when the water's turned off because of a problem, you want to be able to protect yourself from that problem so that your community doesn't face the taps being turned off.
But the nice thing about a situation like Toledo is they can see the problem.
Yes.
You know, they can see it coming, they can stop it. As soon
Exactly.
as they detect it, we don't have that
You
option.
don't have that, and so this is what the ongoing source water protection plan is designed to do. It's designed to give you tools so that you can see problems coming at you and so that you can protect yourself from any possible problems.
Now, if you had a problem and you were on your 5-year time of travel, in theory you have 5 years minimum to solve your problem. Whether it's put in interceptor wells, put in, treatment barrier walls, do something that prevents it from coming to you. So that's what a 1 and 5-year time of travel is supposed to do. It's supposed to buy you time, tell you how much time you have, so you can develop your options to fix the problem when you see it coming at you.
I guess that's what I need to learn about, is what options we would have, because I don't know anything about that end.
Depends on what's coming at you.
Yeah.
And like you said, Norm,
Welcome you on the water.
those irrigation wells could actually act as interceptor wells?
Potentially. And the other option you guys purchased a few years ago, the well field due west of the city. That is kind of outside the flow path. Or distant flow path.
Well, we got to educate the people that water is very valuable, very H2O. I have to cite myself, it shows how old I am. We were allowed 1 canteen of water a day in the Pacific. That was it. You could shave with it, or you could drink. You save it for drinking.
You would be right at home in California right now.
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't go there.
Do we have any other questions for,
Nice presentation.
Very good, thank
Thank
you very
you.
much.
Well done.
you guys are free to leave, you don't have to, since you have to go back to Columbus, you don't have to
I was
hang out
going to
with
say,
us.
we'd be happy to stay in case someone has an informal question later at the end of the meeting.
Thank you. Number 5 on the agenda then is a presentation on advanced metering infrastructure, or AMI.
Okay. Okay, a couple reasons why we're bringing this up when we're talking about this. We did build some of this model into the water cost of service analysis that was presented to you guys a couple weeks back. Back in 2009, roughly around 2009, at that time, staff was we were looking at at the time they called it a smart metering project, which is smart metering, sort of a dirty word, okay? So it's more of an advanced metering project. And at that time, we were looking at it through a performance contract, and that was with JCI. And at the time, board and council together decided to hold off on a project of that nature until the technology matured, so that those numbers and any kind of problem behind these kind of projects would be folded out over the next couple of years. So with that being stated, staff at the time, we were instructed to continually monitor the situation, interview those potential metering candidates out there that provide this service for water and electric or whatever else we have, and continually do assessments on this. So we have been doing assessments and monitoring and keeping up with the market since about 2009, okay? Probably a year and a half ago, and we'll get into this with the slide presentation, we started working with AMP and tapping in on their resources. Because quite honestly, even in a utility our size, you are talking a large capital expense in doing a project of this nature, okay? And there's an ongoing or reoccurring expense. It's an operational expense that just continues to grow thereafter. And we're not ready to take that on the IT side. So working with AMP, there's 11 of us right now, 11 us municipalities, and a bunch more in the wings waiting to see how this goes. So let me go through the presentation real quick, and then I will take questions. We'll talk more about it. Okay, so the presentation goal would be to update you guys, the board, on our pursuit of getting our meters changed out to make them what they need to be today. I also want to provide a little bit of the overview of the AMPS AMI program, and I call it AMPS AMI because it's a consortium of a lot of us municipals encouraging AMP to take this on under their fold. Okay, again, as I mentioned, since 2009, BMU evaluated an AMI project. It was a performance-based contract through Johnson Controls. Utility department leaders have continually met and evaluated many of the current solutions, as I had mentioned. Realizing our needs mirrored many of those of the other AMP communities. We were one of the team members that encouraged AMP to initiate an effort among all the members to evaluate AMI as an AMP service, okay, as a bigger picture. Is this something they should be providing us as our joint action agency, okay? So AMP and the 11 other of us performed. That's okay. They're still on. You guys are good. We had an alignment here, so we're fine.
Yeah, don't go home.
Yeah, don't go, just hang out here. So, AMP Smart Grid Advisory Committee was formed about 18 months ago to facilitate the exchange of information among the members, ourselves. At that time, there was a common interest. There was, like I said, 11 communities, roughly our size or bigger, that were very much interested in taking this next step and trying to make it financially possible. So the economics were the big pushing point. So at that time, AMP, through our efforts, hired Leidos Engineering to do a study. That was in 2014. They modeled several scenarios for us as members. They want to look at the municipalities deploying the meters and the networks and the systems. Can those municipals do that themselves? So that was one part of the study. Then they also want to look at the municipality using a commercial hosting provider. And a commercial hosting provider is there's somebody out there providing those resources, managing the data, and shooting it back to us. Can the host utility do that? And then they're also looking at a single hosting provider for all members. That would be, can AMP host all this and shoot it out to multiple member communities? And then also an AMP developed hosting service. Can AMP broker a better deal to have a hosting service off-site that they manage on our benefit? Okay, so the study actually, the modeling actually showed that to get any kind of benefits from lower costs on the economy of scale, they had to have at least 85,000 meters committed to this project. I'm going to tell you right now, currently with the 11 other communities, we're a little over 110,000. And when we hit the 250,000 mark, the prices do drop substantially when you're talking economy of scale. So when we talk meters, that is metering data points. That's an electric meter, a water meter, and in some cases, in some utilities, gas meters, okay? So The Smart Grid Advisory Committee was formed. Our goals as a committee, we wanted to make sure that we could enable remote readings while maintaining stable meter-to-cash processes, meter-to-cash billing processes. That is exactly what it states. We know our clerk treasurers, we're municipal people. We know they like things a certain way, and I have talked to Lori about this and other communities. Our job has always been in the forefront would be to make sure that meter reading lands on their desk the right way and seamlessly. Okay, so that's the most important thing. No hiccups in that. We also needed to start looking at the billing processes for large industrial and commercial accounts. Those large commercial industrial accounts today are requiring more data from us. They are asking for ways to save on energy, lower their demand costs, distributed generation for those that are familiar with that, with solar on the roof, with wind. There's a lot of things going on in the industry, and these large accounts want to be able to take advantage of that. Today's metering system cannot do it. Okay, so this is another thing that's in the forefront that we have to look at. Again, as I noted, many utilities still read meters completely by hand, and we still do a lot of our billing calculations for the demand, which is your reactive. We do that. That portion of our large power bills are physically put into the computer system every month by hand. They're not uploaded, they're put in by hand. We also need to utilize remote, we would like to utilize the remote connect and disconnect the service. Okay. Again, we also want to satisfy those customers today who are seeking usage to information via the internet. That goes for the residential customers. We have to realize today's millennials, those people that are between their 20s and probably 35 to maybe 40, they're technology-driven people. The phone is in the hand. They want to access from everything from an app or from the phone. You get my age and younger as we go up the scale. How's that? They like to see the bill in their hand. They want to talk about it. So we're in this crossroads today when we have customers calling us and asking us for information on why is my electric bill so high or why is my water bill so high. I can only give them baseline general data. Hey, we noticed this last month you were at 500 kilowatt hours. I can't tell you when in the month you accumulated that reading, but this is what you have at the end of the month. Same thing on water. Why is my water bill so high? Well, it looks like you might have had a leak. You know, the book denotes that maybe you were watering your yard. With the AMI system, we can break that down and start to give them, hey, we took a snapshot of your month. On this day, and this day, we noticed you had some high usage. Did you have something going on at home? That's probably where your usage came from. So there's a lot of data that we're not providing our customers. The other thing is improve our outage assessment during storms and normal operations. I say that one tongue-in-cheek after our lights just flashed a little bit ago. We have a rather robust, strong system. We take advantage, and I'm going to say our customers are used to quick response times on short outages. We fall into more than a half-hour outage. Our phone lines are lit up. The Facebook world is taking us to task, and we're trying to play recover. In the real world, the 2-hour outage is considered a fast outage. That means they're in, they're out, they're fixed. Even though we keep our numbers down and tight, and our staff, we have really good staff, highly skilled staff members, the meters themselves will report back to our SCADA system and tell us when they're on and off. It will actually allow us to troubleshoot even quicker. So that's a definite positive. So AMPS Group went out for RFIs or RFPs on March 27th. Okay, they asked for the responses from all these vendors to be due back by April 24th so that we could review them. The vendors list that we sent to came from all us as pilot municipalities, as well as any additional vendor who wanted to put their name in the hat to provide an RFI. So 23 vendors went out, 19 responses, and when I say 16 demonstrations, myself and staff, Al Sullivan, Norm, Joe, and all those other staff members from all the other 11 communities, as well as the AMP staff, sat through 16 demonstrations that were on average 5.5 to 6 hours each. Because realize when you're talking AMI, you're talking the meter asset, you're talking the back office solutions, is all the pretty stuff in the middle, and you're also talking the final move it over to the billing system. Not just one billing system, multiple billing systems. There's no intent of saying we're all going to change to that type. It is you have to work with Lori and Rhonda and the mayor and all these other billing systems with the data that they're accustomed to getting. So you're doing this pretty stuff here, but what they see is this, okay? So the pilot member communities then held a workshop on May 13th. I had staff members went down, I could not. And they began working on what they call the functional requirements. So they pulled out the 9 vendors that made that short list. So of these 9 vendors, which ones did A, B, and C, which ones did A and B, which ones did A and C, and on that short list, what are the most important things that we all see that make sense to us? So there was a large group of eyes on this. So then we released an RFP on July 6th, and the responses received July 31st on those 9 vendors. So that was, hey, we like what you have to offer, now we're going to beat you up. These are the things we truly want you to see if you can do. Okay, so with that, we've whittled it down to 2 vendors. We're still currently, as an AMP team, beating those vendors up. So, AMP, the goal, the program, as a member group, they're looking at anticipating the project launch in 2016. That means sometime in 2016, this thing is going to get rolling at some shape or form, okay? They're going to focus on simplify the AMI adoption for the AMP members. That means, what's the simplest way to make this happen to get first and foremost meter to cash? That's it, meter to cash. All the other things, once the meter to cash is working, that's the frosting on the cake, is all the other things. And those are the things you'll want to see eventually. They want to recognize that there are variable differences among our members. Okay, so that's Bryan, Ohio, that is Piqua, and all the other groups that are involved. Okay, so the pilot members, the benefits we're going to see, and we've already started to preliminary numbers that I got the view, and Norm, and I believe Al was in the meeting with us as well. The aggregating purchase of equipment, prices have really came down. When you start talking to vendors, and our little 6,800 meters versus 100,000 meters, we're starting to see some good pricing. We're starting to see the numbers come in where we're about 35% cheaper than if we do it on our own. So, I mean, it's very encouraging. We want to mitigate the risk with the local deployment. Again, we're managing a bigger picture here, so risk is spread across the board. So the rate of failure is actually reduced. If we're doing it by ourselves, we're just a little guy in a big pond, okay? We also want to support the business case and the financial modeling that's provided in front of us. Does it make sense at these numbers? And those numbers have been provided to us. And then the assistance presentation and leadership. There's a lot of communities that are involved that don't know how to present this, and they haven't been in the game as long as we have. I always say, and talking to the team, it was actually good that we got shot down back in 2009. I mean, it hurt. It really did. As a manager at that time, and it's one of those really, we just got pummeled here. But the best thing for us was it put us back to the drawing board, and we stayed on the drawing board the whole time. So it got to the point when we were with this AMP group analyzing these vendors, we actually knew as much about their product as the person throwing it out during a presentation, which it made it interesting at times, to say the least. Okay, so let's talk about BMU's state of the meter reading today. And this is actually how we do our meter reading today, and that is a picture of one of our meter readers. We have handheld devices, okay? And we physically go to the meter and we punch in the number, be it a water or electric device. That is then uploaded on a handheld unit. It's stuck in this cradle. It's uploaded. The difference is I didn't throw another little computer in, but we have another computer that sits right here because this device dumps into our computer out back, and then that computer takes the information, messes the way it needs to, and takes it to Lori. So we have another step in here, but this is truly how a handheld system is. So back when I started at the utility, handheld meant you had a book, you wrote the numbers down, you learned how to subtract really fast, and you learned that if you made mistakes, you had Pearl Babcock all over you. So today, mistakes are still there, but we've got them shrunk, okay? So, manual reading process, handheld device. We have an aging meter infrastructure and an aging handhelds. Our handheld devices today, they have mechanical needs that are not being supported. So we send our handheld device off at fails, and they are putting used parts back in it because they don't make them anymore. Okay, your cell phone has more capabilities and data movement than that handheld device does. And then the software is no longer being supported. So we are truly on borrowed time as a utility. Lori and her staff are aware of this. They've been working with us on it. We've been aware of this for a while. It's little baby steps. I'll tell you right now, in 2007, when I was electrical superintendent, we invested about $15,000. And these were the upgrades then. And these were upgrades knowing that they would be a Band-Aid because we're not really sure where we're going to go in the future. If these fail today, you're back to printing books, you're back to handwriting, and Lori's staff is back to hand entering data into the system. So it's not a pretty thought or pretty process. So how does a true AMI system work? The simplest form is the meters ring out and they talk to a data collector. The data collector has a backhaul device. It has our fiber, a cell signal, a wireless signal, or something that starts to pump that back to the utility. Once it hits a utility end, if we hosted it here, it would go into an AM head and it would then be uploaded to the billing system. That's the simplest form, okay? So the remote readings on the simple form works. When we talk about two-way capabilities give you the ability to do disconnects and reconnects via the computer. You don't have to physically send a truck out. It also allows you to do what they call mass updates to the meter. Again, meters today are electronic devices. They're solid state. They're not electromechanical. They're not a bunch of gears and whatnot. As with your computer, as with your modems, as with everything that's today's computer driven, there is firmware updates. This two-way system allows you to push a firmware update across the whole spectrum here. So you don't physically have to go out to every meter. It's a mass update. Okay, so an AMI hosts a solution and with back office needs, and what we envision, this is where we're at with the AMP group. You would still have your smart meters in your field. And again, I hate the term smart meters. You have the new meters in the field talking to a collector. It is going to a backhaul device, but there's a layer of integration here. And that layer of integration, right about here over, is where that AMP world picks up. Billing is here no matter what. This is Lori's world. This is where the information comes to her. Everything that goes on here, this world doesn't care about, doesn't see. All they want is the number to send in the bill, and it better be right. Okay? That's pretty simple. I mean, am I hitting anything that's not simple in that, Lori?
Being right's the main
Give me the number, make sure it's right. Okay? And our customers demand that too, by the way. It's not just Lori. Our customers demand that. Our integrity is behind this. But behind that, what you also have is an MDM. It's a data it's a management data system. It takes all that information and lines it up a certain way so you can use it for something. It holds all the reads. Today we physically go out and read one time. This system reads every 15 minutes and pulls the data and sits on it. So that when Lori's group calls for, I want book 7, let's say, in this particular area, it releases the final reads on book 7 to Lori for her system to do its math. Okay? Utility portal. Back office is the utility and Lori staff have another way to access the readings. Billing's different. Realize billing is taking a set of numbers and dropping them into a specific slot in the billing system. The billing system does the math and it generates out. The utility portal is the side where you're going to start to interact with your customers. Customer portal. And again, these are all behind very protected firewalls. I mean, this information is housed in the world where AMP has all the stuff for the generation assets they house. So I mean, it's very protected. Customer portal. You want a customer portal because this is the interface where your customers are going to go in on the net and be tied to only their system, and all they're going to see is their information, because that's all it's released in this portal. Okay? The tools that are built into that are a separate group. You'll have load training, you'll have all these other special things that are right there. Then an outage viewer. That's that meter calling out to our SCADA system, because it just doesn't talk to our SCADA system. We have to change whatever the meter talks in, that language, to SCADA language to tell us what's going on. So as a group with AMP, we're looking at this as an inclusive package. Okay, so it's an actual umbrella of everything. On our own, I'm gonna be honest, on our own we could do this. But the problem is once you get past this area here is the most expensive operational cost in the future. Those capital assets we're buying are gonna sit out there and depreciate over the next 15 years. We know that. But the computer side, we all have computers, we all have phones. They are continually being upgraded. There's an expense to that. Software is continually being upgraded. Maintenance fees are on the software. So, the deployment and support of IT systems requires specialized equipment and specialized people. We have that to a small scale, but not at a large scale. Again, the economy of scale is where we're going to get our benefit here. The staff that we're utilizing at AMP is a very, very large IT staff. They've sat with our people. I'm very confident. I know the guys that are doing this. They're gonna manage the relationships with the vendors. And by that, I mean, and I just put it in here, many of our distributors help us. They really do. I mean, that's what we have distributors reps for, but only with the vendors they represent. Okay, so if we decide to go with X and our vendor doesn't support or rep X, you're probably not gonna get the best support. They're gonna guide us to whoever they use. Even if it's a terrible system, well, that's where we're gonna be guided to, okay? Wouldn't be a good fit. Again, the belief is successful AMI projects require a partnership and an effective presentation to leadership, community engagement. That part is, once we start to roll with this, I will be bringing this to you guys. This is a project that's coming in the 2016 year. It's actually built into your water rate study. It will be evaluated and built into an electric rate study, which is coming in the future, because we have to. This is the only way we can address distributed generation and solar and all these other things. We have to have the infrastructure in place to even have a chance to address that. But we will get community engagement. We'll start to talk to them about it. It's not about, and I've already tried to kill this because I don't like it, it's not about Big Brother watching. Quite honestly, Big Brother does not care what you're doing. But Big Brother here is you owning us, okay? So you actually have control over Big Brother as a community, as a board. We're just trying to get you the information that you need to make you happy, to have you informed, to help you save energy, to help you save money. I mean, that's our biggest goal. Even with our commercial accounts, I say, and Al Sullivan's heard me say this, our job is to teach our commercial accounts how to manipulate our bill in such a way they save money. It's not circumventing the bill. Our rules and regs are laid out in such a manner that we know that if we help them save money here, it's a benefit. And we do that daily. I mean, we work on that a lot. It's the same principle we should be taking with our residential customers. Our goal should be to teach them how to use the resources we have more efficiently. Okay, so first phase of the project was to be completed by a member outreach. That's ongoing right now. We as a group, and I say we, because Bryan is part of this, will continue to identify those AMP communities who are having interest. As I said, there's 11 of us. Bryan, Berlin, Newton Falls, Piqua, Seaford. I'm not even going to crucify the name in Pennsylvania. Dover, Ephrata, Painesville, Tip City, and Versailles. As many as we have here, there's just as many on the outskirts looking in. And some of these that are on the outskirts are looking in are some of the larger AMP members. There's one in the southern Ohio that's sitting about 36,000 meters on the electric side. Half of them are doing water, the other half are doing electric. Some of these have already done the electric with a group that we were looking at doing it with, and they haven't been happy because it failed. So now they want to take the meters they have and utilize the group to pull the data to get it moved the right way. And some of these use our current billing system. So I have confidence that this will get worked through the right way. Okay, the benefits of partnership with AMP. And I know sometimes, I'm going to tell you guys right now, and I've told AMP this, and being on the board, sometimes AMP is looked at as Big Brother making us do things. This is not one of those cases. We've been trying to kick those doors down. We are AMP. And the board members that went with me down to the conference, and the mayor's heard me say this, and AMP staff has heard me say this. In fact, I probably more than too vocal. We are AMP. Every municipal community that belongs to this joint action agency makes up AMP. This is us. We're part of this group, okay? Economy of scale for field pricing, we can't get that on our own. To make anything of any kind of significance happen, to benefit our customers, we can't get these benefits. We have to go as a group. Financing options. There's some options available, working through the state as well. I did talk to Lori about a couple of them. I'm not going to dump those on the table right now until I figure out how we're really going to handle this. Again, realizing your water cost of service study, we've already mentioned that recovery tool for this part of the project for the water has been figured out over a 10-year period. So we know we're going to be making a payment, but I'm not sure where it's going to be to. Is it going to be to the state of Ohio? Is it going to be to the electric department? Is it going to be to somebody? We don't know yet. But I do know the numbers that we put together are coming in exactly what we thought. That payment, that collection there in the water is going to make it happen for water. Support for the AMI development, project management, customer outreach, presentations, municipal leadership. Those are all important. That project management, my staff does not have the time today, and this is that same old song and dance, you get a bunch of violins out. to manage a project of this size, even here. If we were to take this on ourselves, you're talking probably a handful of meters every day getting changed out, and this would be a 5-year process, and before you know it, you're behind the 8 ball because you didn't get it all done. A turnkey like this is you're hiring people to come in and do a complete change out. As our staff are still reading meters by hand and making sure that data is going to the lorry the right way, the infrastructure needs to happen. And the customer outreach. If those customers are upset, there needs to be an 800 number where they're contacting people and we're getting work orders generated right to us here at the utility. That number needs to be publicized during the outreach process so that Lori's staff and my staff down here are not getting bombarded because, you know, Tom, your meter guy walked through my flowers. What are you going to do? Happens all the time. I mean, it's part of business. But we want those customers, when they call, they're getting somebody. And we're getting that information and we're getting out there and talking to them. Again, like I said, one number to call. We know AMP will have that staff on hand. That's one of the big things that we all pressed as municipals sitting in the room talking about it. There needs to be a one-call number that gets that to us. You know, our customers don't wait. The vendor relationships, they will manage. They as an AMP, not BMU. I honestly do not want to manage those relationships. Again, there will be times when that vendor relationship will be stressed. It will be stressed in the sense of if that team, my members included, are not getting what they want, somebody's got to be the strong arm. Okay? Someone's going to be twisting that arm a little bit. Shouldn't be us. We're just the end user. Get us the product, we'll get it put in. And then again, AMP staff will manage the functional components. Readings not come in, collectors down. They're going to call us and tell us what's down, and they're going to have the backups on hand, and we're going to help get them in with their assistance. We know about the total number of collectors we would have in the system. Most of the systems that we're looking at today, the two that are made the final cut, are about 99.5% reading accuracy, which means within a 24-hour period, 99.5% of them will give you the last read that you call out for. Every once in a while, you'll have a meter that will go to sleep because maybe somebody parked over to a tree or a bush, got in its way, and it couldn't read out because they didn't get the wake-up call. It will get it, though. Okay, so again, almost 100%. The back office technologies. That is all the really cool stuff that goes on in the background. That is the taking of the data, turning it into SSI language, and dropping it into Lori's plate. And that's taking that same language and turning it to whatever it's supposed to be and drop it into PICLIS. Okay, they manage that. They will also manage those relationships with SSI. And what we envision, there has been some conversations with SSI, and I say that one because that's who we use. SSI is growing and doing some really good things with their software. This is going to help open those doors. So we'll have some input then as a municipal on what we think the world should look like. And then utilities, and this is big, we'll begin to share, I thought I corrected the typo there, the best practices process. You know, quite honestly, we all do things a little different as utilities. Some of them are really hokey, some of them are really good. We, as board members today in those communities that really get active, I don't like to be age discriminative, but people my age on the board are starting to recognize, you know what, there are best shared practices or best practices in these processes that we all need to incorporate that make sense. Again, their comment was we don't want to reinvent the wheel. This is not about reinventing the wheel. It's about taking the wheel that's already there, spinning, it's a good grease wheel, and bringing it home and using it. And discarding some of those things that does not work. And then the share of IT labor and resources by the collective group. AMP will be accountable to attract, retain, and compensate those staff members. I'm telling you right now, good IT people that manage data like this make a lot of money. And they're highly skilled. And the tenure of IT staff, I don't have any IT staff here, it's mine doing, I don't want you guys to hear this, is about 3 years and they move on. They are project-driven, data-hungry individuals. They embrace challenges. The staff members that I know from AMP, those people are just amazing. The mayor's shaking his head. He knows Brandon and Jared and these guys. They embrace information, and the tougher the project, the deeper they roll their sleeves up and dive into it. Okay? We're starting to experience that here with our small IT staff, with Cody, who you just hired. Cody, in the last 3 weeks since you hired him, has rolled up his sleeves and he's dove in everything. I mean, the kids just run. It's amazing. Those are the kind of people we want. But at this level of managing servers and data and moving data and vendors, we don't have the staff for that. I don't necessarily know if we'd have the staff if we did it on our own, because our staff today is completely buried in what we do, and we do it well, but we don't have the time or the extra space to put more on the plate, okay? So, that is where we're at. I know the board members that went down to the AMP conference got a very similar presentation by AMP, because that was one of the things we had asked for as a committee to talk about this at the AMP conference. There were individuals who didn't even know we were doing this. So I'll take questions, I'll take them here, so when I get back to my seat, you don't have to beat on me.
Well, I enjoyed going to Columbus, and after hearing Ample presented, I was sold 100%. We should move forward.
I appreciate that we have been conservative in moving forward until the technology, until they had the bugs worked out of it instead of jumping the gun like some of the other municipalities did. And I also appreciate that you and the leaders from the other municipalities advocated for us to get that assistance from AMP, because I think that's a very good fit. And I think that that's going to help us to realize all these benefits.
Questions, comments, and this is actually not just for the board. I'll take anything from Lori, Rhonda, the mayor.
It's altogether a different approach than it was earlier. It's good that we waited a minute. I mean, it makes a heck of a lot more sense.
Yeah, because if we'd done that 7 years ago, some of this stuff now failed, and they're stuck with the money.
So what I'm going to do,
Technology changes fast.
so what's going to happen, the next step for me, for you folks? To be 100% transparent.
You present it to make a motion?
No, not yet. This is more informal. I want to let you guys know.
No, I didn't mean tonight, I mean down the road.
Down the road, what will end up happening is we are still haggling out with 2 of the vendors. When I say we, AMP staff, the committee, we did turn them back on 2 of the vendors that meet this, and we asked for better pricing. Because we're going to beat them up just a little more. I mean, because quite honestly, when we make this commitment, you're with that vendor for the next 10 years because those are the parts you're going to use. So we want to make sure we are getting the best price and the best support. There was another part of this that we really wanted to stress. We had one vendor who offered to host all this information for the first year to get it up and running before they handed it over to all the utilities. And they also wanted to be a partner so that in the future, when there were server changeouts or electronic issues, we could redirect the data to them and then bring it right back to us after we fixed what was wrong. So, I mean, that's a positive. But on our end, once we get back with the AMP committee that I'm involved with, I will have some for sure numbers. And we will run up the numbers on Bryan Municipal Utilities. There will be a contract. Rhonda will have the contract. Okay, I'm not moving on anything until it goes through my members beside me over here.
Well, after that presentation, Columbus, I believe that there'll be more people involved want to join, and that will reduce the cost because of the better buying power.
So,
am I correct on that?
Yeah, so as a group, the 11 of us have already anticipated that, and I hate to say this, because we have put so much time and energy in, and our staff here has too. I mean, these guys have put a lot of time and energy in. As an 11 member, one of the members on this 11-member panel group, whatever you want to call it, we chose at this time to lock everybody else out. Because you can't keep adding bodies and communities to a project that is at 3/4 mark. We need to get this thing up, running, instituted, before we start to bring in other members. At that time, when these other members start to come on board, and I'm telling you, there are quite a few of them out there that are looking to come this way. At that time, your pricing will even get drove down more because behind all this, there's a small fee to read those meters and get them back to the information back to you. So the more you get, the cheaper it gets. But we gotta get it in first. So as I said, I'll continue to work with AMP staff and as my other members, bring back a product to discuss again with some numbers. And I want very, very, very early in the process, the tentative contract with tentative financing ideas to get to Lori, to Rhonda. This will be built in next year's budget. In some shape or form, it will be built in there. and realize if it doesn't take off, or the board at that time chooses, you know what, we're gonna hold off again, it's a no loss, no harm, no foul. That money gets put back to the general fund at the end of the year anyway, so it can just sit there. But we need to allocate that to get this going. So that's where we're at,
In terms of adding other meters, I believe you said that we were at 110,000,
give or take.
and the next break is at 250,000. It'd be kind of a little bit of a stretch to think that we were going to add 140,000 in a short amount of time and
You have,
be able to realize another break, isn't it?
well, so there's 3 communities right now that are on the edge looking in. The one is at 22,000 electric meters. That's only electric meters only. They want to then incorporate their water in as well. So you just gain 44,000. The other one, very south edge of the state of Ohio, has around 38,000 on the electric. They also have gas and they also have water. But the electric side of what's going to drive it, because the I feel good electric did it type attitude will happen. And then these other assets that are separate parts of the city will come in and go, okay, now we're ready to jump in with you. So right there, you're looking at another 66. So we can jump 100 rather quick. You know, our goal is, quite honestly, there's a lot of smaller communities out there that we should be working with. You know, there's a lot of small communities that came to us since, and I'm saying us, the group, and said, you know, we want to do this. We've been trying to figure out a way to do this for the last 5 years. We can't financially do it. You know?
So the price is gonna be more attractive now than it was, what, 7 years ago?
So right off the bat, we were estimating 1.5 million for the water side. Okay, and those are real numbers that we've been working with my staff for the last 5 years. Some of the preliminary numbers I'm looking at with installation is about $1 million on the water side.
And the technology's there.
Yes.
So are we looking at just water first,
No, it's going to be both.
or both?
Both.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, our system doesn't run in such a way that I could just give Lori water readings only and then come back and give her electric
Okay.
readings.
Well, that makes
SSI is
sense.
not set up that way.
Okay.
So, and realize everything we do, even if we're on board and we do this, there is a time period when it comes to the contract side that I want to make sure Rhonda has time to review, chew up, spit, argue about, I don't like this, I like this, because that's kind of stuff that I want. On the other side, I got to have Lori sit down and go, okay, this makes sense, but on the software package we have with SSI, we don't have this. So I don't know if that makes sense for us. So I mean, there's going to be some give and take movement in there too. Okay? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Bryan.
Number 6 then is affect semi-monthly disbursements.
So moved.
Second.
Al,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Bonnie,
Yes.
Jim, Sid.
Yes.
And number 7, comments from BPA and staff. Director?
I'll try to keep mine short finally. Yeah, thanks, Al. Todd Stimful, Communication Department, just completed his digital technician course. He is now a master technician, HFC Networks. That's one of the highest rankings we can get in the NCTI system that is their training. So I want to commend him for busting out there and getting that done. Bryan, solar production. Your total so far is 2,202,000 kilowatt hours. I believe we provided these to you. The trending is very similar to the last couple of years, so we're on target to be where we want to be. Auglaize Hydro, as you know, a couple months back we started using the same trending data to show Auglaize. Auglaize has been at 8,233,000 kilowatt hours. Again, very cyclical, so you look at the years, the water flow is the same. And realize we do have one of our units down, has been down for 6 months. It's our biggest unit at Auglaize. So these are the numbers without our largest unit. So other than that, I encourage everyone to come out to Public Power Evening Thursday night. Hopefully the weather cooperates and just sort of hang out and watch the guys. And I'm going to let Al or Bonnie talk about the linemen when it gets back to them.
Mayor?
Real quick, a great ample MEA conference. I think the meetings were well attended, and also you can see technology moving faster than we can even put our feet on the ground, is what it amounts to. Also, this is Fire Prevention Week along with Public Power Week, so if you get out quick enough, you might still get a piece of chicken up to the fire station. So that's going on right now. And also a reminder that it was in the paper October 29th, they're having a recycling event out at Buffalo Road where you can take all your recycle things. There's been big ads in the paper on that. We'll continue to be on there before that time. So I guess that's it for now.
Rhonda? Lori?
No, ma'am.
I just brought our rodeo crew in here to kind of recognize them for all their hard work they did at the AMP Rodeo this year. It's the second annual event. I'm very proud of our group of guys here that actually, do the work and really, take pride in what they do and they practice. They really, it's a camaraderie, I guess. It brings all of us together as a team, this event, and really appreciate you guys letting us do that. But I did want to recognize our guys. I got JJ Roop here, Brandon Sufel, and Brad Plummer. They're our team, that go down there to the AMP rodeo and do the events. So they really do a great job. So I just want to recognize them. Shane Smith couldn't make it tonight, but he was also the alternate with the group. But he's just as much part of this group as what they are. So, but just want to give them guys a round of applause. Secondly, at the AMP conference, we did win some safety awards. I did want to mention in generation, this is for no time lost, as nobody got hurt or anything. We won a safety award for that. Our transmission and distribution department also won a no time lost safety award. And we won a Division III System Improvement Award, honorable mention for our Norwood Place subdivision underground project that we've accomplished in the last couple of years. And lastly, we've got a resolution for a mutual aid event that we helped Northwest Electric. I believe it was on May 13th and 14th. The co-op had some eye-line poles blow down on Scott Road, and we were asked to come and support them and help them do that. And these guys went out and did that. We got a resolution from AMP recognizing that. So this thank you and good work of our crew and stuff, and we appreciate you letting us do what we do here. So thank you.
Thanks, Al. Anyone else? Al?
I'm looking for you going to California on the Rodeo National. And ladies, I enjoyed your presentation very much. That's it.
I'd like to congratulate those guys. You and I got to go down, and Miss Vicki and Martin, and I got to interact with you guys, being on this side of the fence, and I enjoyed it. And Vicki had a lot of comments about you guys that she didn't know you did what you did. So, and thanks for the safety. That's number one.
Karen?
And again, I'm happy for your challenge, stepping up and taking the challenge, and your durability and strength and determination. You're a proud group of people to have with the city, and just keep it up. And Derek, good job on the water studies and helping out there. Very important work. You all do very important work. Proud of you.
I agree with everybody else. I don't know what I could say that hadn't already been said, but good job, and I enjoyed the presentation. I did learn quite a bit from the presentation. Thank you.
Did you have something else?
Yes, I did. I'm looking forward to going next year, and I will lobby for you guys to go. Because that was fun.
California National.
You gotta take your own water if you go there, though.
Yeah.
Right. I agree that I came out and watched you guys practice, and then also saw the competition, and you guys worked really hard, a lot of heart and soul into it, and really appreciate your dedication. So, and Al and Jim and I all attended, along with the director and mayor, the AMP conference, and it was very informative, a lot of information still to digest. Anyone else? We'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Al?
Yes.
Dick?
Yes.
Bonnie?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.